Yep, we're almost there already. Okay, we're live.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 17th, and I call the regular meeting of the Brookfield Board of Education to order. So let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have all of our board members in attendance tonight, so we can move on to public comment. And I see that we have quite a few people joining us tonight, which is nice. So I just wanted to remind you guys to all mute yourself for now, and then just sort of, there's like a little raise hand reaction down at the bottom of the Zoom taskbar. Just raise your hand when you want to talk, and then I'll call on you. You can unmute yourself. Just state your name and your current address for the record. I know that some BHS alums are here, so just sort of maybe say what class you're from, and then each speaker will have 3 minutes. So who would like to go first? Okay, Adonai, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adonai Sebastian, BHS class of 2013, and my Brookfield residence is at 14 Vale Road. I was one of 4 initial alumni, along with Tess, Bridget, and Jack Haggerty, who approached Superintendent Burrell and the Board of Education members regarding their response to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm here today, along with others, to share our experiences with the Brookfield school system, which highlight the gaps in our education regarding racism and the experience of Black people in our country, and the absolute necessity of using this moment in history to create sustainable change in our schools. Though I am not Black, I would still like to share one experience I had during high school, which might not seem on its surface too problematic, but which does highlight the complexity of the topic at hand and the necessity of anti-racism training for both faculty and students. One of the rare instances during my education in which race was discussed was during a class discussion on white privilege. I was the only person of color in this classroom. While my classmates began making well-intentioned remarks into their own privilege, I began to feel increasingly upset, but also confused with my own emotions because no one had made any overt racist remarks. It was not until college where I learned about white savior complex that I understood why I had felt upset that day. During that class, a well-intentioned discussion on white privilege had turned into a show of white savior complex, in which I felt that I was being pitied by my peers. It's somewhat humiliating to feel pitied when you have pride in who you are as a person of color. This experience of mine speaks to 2 specific points. First, even the most well-intentioned discussions can fail to meet the mark. The nuances associated with how you phrase your language in discussions are not easily learned by anyone, and these discussions must be created carefully and led well. This means that all faculty need to undergo professional diversity training led by Black individuals so that faculty feel confident in their ability to lead students in such discussions. Secondly, the perspectives of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color must be included in every single decision you make. Many of these anti-racist educational initiatives will be to assist white students to become more knowledgeable about race. However, you must consider the experience of BIPOC in these teaching moments as well. The focus of any educational directive regarding anti-racism should be to foster interracial discussion. Furthermore, minorities are not exempt from displaying racist attitudes, and neither should any person of color be tokenized for their perspectives in such discussions. To address this concern, you must include Black individuals in all decision-making in the future that pertains to addressing anti-racism initiatives. And finally, when I was younger, I used to let microaggressions slide because I felt that people were well-intentioned and that was good enough. Given the current movement and the higher standards expected of us now, good enough is not good anymore. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, Kiana, it's all yours.
Hello, my name is Kiana Shabazz Williams. My residence is 207 Wisconsin Road. So I wanted to talk about my experience while in the Connecticut public school system. I'm from Danbury and I recently moved here, so my experience is a bit different. However, I feel that is still very relevant. So African American history is American history, although in schools they're never seen this way. We talk about the same few topics such as slavery, the Civil War, and Martin Luther King. So those topics, they always watered down and I was never able to see myself in history. I feel as if there's a lot more that needs to be taught that is being ignored right now. For example, Black Wall Street, the school to prison pipeline, and the various Black Americans that made history and helped to build America. I wasn't able to learn about my true history until after 8th grade when I became homeschooled and my mom and I were able to take real charge of what I was learning. Education is the best way to combat ignorance, and if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. It is extremely important for everyone to learn the true non-whitewashed version of their American history. And I wanted to discuss a little bit more about this because I decided to organize a Black Lives Matter rally in Brookfield, and that is on Saturday on the 20th. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kiana. Anyone else? Oh, Angela, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. My residence is at 1009 9th Street, Durham, North Carolina. I'm an alumni of the BHS class of 2013. Like many white people across the US, in reaction to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others, these last few weeks have shocked me as I became aware of the depth of my own ignorance. Prior to this moment, I had failed to truly understand the pervasiveness of the violence against Black Americans and their lived experience, as Claudia Rankin described in 2015, of the daily strain of knowing that as a Black person, you can be killed for simply being Black. This ignorance led to complacency. I didn't see myself as part of the solution to racism in our country. As a person who professes to care about social justice, I have been asking myself, how could this be? When I think back to my education and my experience in Brookfield, I certainly learned about race. I learned about the history of slavery and the mistreatment of Black people up through the Civil Rights Movement, as well as in English classes from works such as To Kill a Mockingbird and A Raisin in the Sun. But for the most part in Brookfield, racism was taught to me, as it was taught to me, felt like part of our past. I assumed that, as King had said, the arc of history bends towards justice, and that even if we hadn't eradicated racism yet, that was our eventual destination, and if we simply waited, we would arrive there. I also didn't feel like I personally was responsible and had a role to play in combating racism because I didn't hold any personal racist attitudes. And while I may have intellectually understood the fact that racism is about systems we live in that advantage some people and not others, in addition to just individually held beliefs, my white defensiveness didn't allow this understanding to truly sink in and to change the lens through which I saw the world or the way I acted day to day. I was called to unpack my invisible knapsack of white privilege, but it wasn't long until I put it back on and continued to carry it around with me blindly. In the past few weeks, white people all over the nation have suddenly started questioning very similar beliefs and realizing that these beliefs have caused us to be passive and prevented us from taking more active and assertive action that is necessary to undo systemic racism. Brookfield Public Schools has an obligation to ensure that the leaders of the future are better equipped than we were with a true and robust understanding of systemic racism that will fuel them to make this country better by working against oppression. Brookfield Public Schools must provide its students with tools that will allow them to dismantle systemic racism and to build a more just society. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Anyone else? Liz, go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Murphy, and my current place of residence is 3 Wilton Drive in Wilmington, Massachusetts, although I lived in Brookfield for 8 years at 1 Stony Farm Lane, and I would have graduated from BHS as a member of the 2018 class. I'm speaking tonight to share with you my experience as a Mexican-American woman in the Brookfield public school system. I'm here as a concerned alumna calling for the implementation of discussions on race, inclusion, privilege, and practices of anti-racism. I largely credit my academic and professional success to the education I received at Brookfield. However, in my time, I felt unheard by the student body and administrators, endured ignorant and racist remarks, and struggled with my identity. I want to speak on one incident that occurred and still weighs heavy on me. My freshman year at BHS in 2014, I was one of a handful of Latinx students among a roughly 90% white student body. A half Mexican boy came to BHS from Danbury High School. From the moment he came, he was called hood, ghetto, and various other racial slurs by students. I recall one day in the hall when my friends pointed him out and remarked, "Look, you and him basically make up one whole Mexican." In that instance, my identity had become a joke to my peers, and the perspective my peers had of me and this young man became painfully obvious. While their intention perhaps was not to hurt me, the impact this experience had on me did cause long-lasting and significant emotional pain. It might be difficult to believe that in that moment, I was unable to do anything but laugh along with my friends. Why aren't you better at soccer? Do you have your papers? You must really be able to jump high after jumping the fence. Can I buy marijuana from your mom? These are just some of the things I was told and asked. Never did I feel that I could go to a teacher or administrator for help. It is important going forward that the Brookfield public school system recognizes internalized racism, which is defined as the acceptance by marginalized racial populations of the negative societal beliefs and stereotypes about themselves. The experience I just shared proves to be an effective illustration of the relationship between racism, white privilege, and internalized racism. While new humanities reading material, the introduction of global themes as a course, and the addition of diverse resources is an excellent place to start, there is so much more that must and can be done. It is necessary that teachers are trained by professionals to be able to effectively engage in courageous conversations with a diverse student body, and that the education of terms like internalized racism, colorism, tokenism, anti-racism, and more are included in the school curriculums. It will be impossible to build a strong community in Brookfield while Black, Indigenous, and other students of color do not feel that they will be heard and appreciated. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Liz. Elijah, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Elijah Hewling III. I live at 34 Hidden Brook Drive in Brookfield, also work at the Brookfield High School. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking Steve Baldwin, the athletic director, for working with me on a statement that we released from the Brookfield Athletic Department. But given the state of our country, everyone should be taking a step back and really taking a good look in the mirror. There's no longer space for people to, quote, stay quiet or refuse to, quote, take a side. Everyone must be accountable for their words and actions. A lack of words or actions at this point is equally disappointing and frustrating. Desmond Tutu said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." While Brookfield is not at all a diverse town or school district, that doesn't mean the issues of institutional racism, racial profiling, and police brutality are not important. The school statement that was emailed out on June 2nd fell inevitably short of the mark, in my opinion. No issue was actually addressed, and I quote, "We want to reassure you that the Brookfield Public School staff are here to provide students and families with support as they may view unsettling images as we watch our country grapple with these issues," end quote. At no point did the email actually say racism, murder, or discuss what the, quote, issues are. Further, they included a link of, quote, books with characters of color. First, reading a book with a person of color does not address the situation, and if the school wants to suggest said books, Why aren't they already in the Brookfield curriculum? Whether we choose to see it or not, we are not doing enough to address the issues of our country. We need to ensure when kids go through the Brookfield school system, they're prepared to join a world that is much more diverse than Brookfield. I recognize that I too have more work to do to help educate kids that I work with. In fact, I spoke to 10 current and former athletes who are also minorities. They all agreed that the teachers in the Brookfield school system are good for the most part, but every single one of them had been called a racial slur multiple times while in the Brookfield school system. Most felt they just had to try and ignore most instances of racism because, quote, nobody would really do anything about it anyway. Of the 10 people I spoke to, none of them could remember having a minority teacher other than world language or a couple of substitutes. I believe we can do better. I believe we must do better. I leave you with a quote from one of the 10 kids that I spoke to. He said, "In my experience with Brookfield, there is no visible problem with the teachers, but there is with the community. Families among our town are still racist, and it's time for the school to step up and teach. If prejudice can be learned, it can also be unlearned, and it starts in our school system. At this point, I would not raise my children in this town only for them to be labeled as, quote, bad influences, as I was many times. It's
Mr. Healy,
time."
I'm gonna have you wrap it up a little bit. Thanks.
Yep, almost done. It's time for the town to promote acceptance more than they ever have before and teach the children about privilege and systemic racism, end quote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, Steph, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Steph Ferrari. I currently live in 7518 West Lexington Avenue in West Hollywood, California. My Brookfield address is 1 Lexington Drive. I lived there for 22 years. I was in the Brookfield school system from kindergarten until graduation in 2014. In reflecting on the town's lack of diversity, I could point to many ways that my peers of color were whitewashed, erased, or othered. How attitude in our town painted Danbury essentially as a dangerous ghetto, or the blatant stereotypes, slurs, and inappropriate jokes that went unpunished, unnoticed, and even encouraged. Since my graduation in 2014, I have lived in Boston, Los Angeles, and New York, where I've been closer to diversity in race, wealth, sexuality, and gender than ever in Brookfield. When I first got to college, I had no idea how jarring it would be to confront my own privilege, and I had a hard time relating and being a good ally to people of color. In hindsight, it would have been nice to have some preparation or better understanding of what dynamics were really at play in the world before I left Brookfield, because I missed out on potential friendships, point of view, and challenges and other benefits of diversity that I was a bit too insecure and defensive to really think about. I think that a lot of students going through the Brookfield school system would benefit from frank and candid conversations with their teachers, parents, and peers about privilege, race, class, and other real world issues that we see on the news, but don't necessarily experience in our town. So I could see this taking form as a semester of required civics classes where students can reflect on their world with readings, speakers, and workshops about racism, sexism, classism, and other isms that present the world much differently than how we live it in Brookfield. These classes could be complemented in the high school with assemblies and speakers similar to those we had on drug abuse and drunk driving, which also had a corresponding parent discussion. It also is up to the parents to engage with their children to discuss what the world is like outside of Brookfield, where cops do more than hand out speeding tickets and bus parties, and voting rights aren't always a right. Furthermore, it is up to the teachers, parents, peers, and the entire community to hold each other accountable in furthering racial tolerance by speaking up against microaggressions, slurs, and hate. In this way, we can make our students better prepared for college and moving to more diverse places, and we can make our students of color feel more welcome and supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. MK, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mary Kate Cloblin. I currently reside at 76 Bruce Road in Red Bank, New Jersey, and I'm speaking as a Brookfield High School alumni that graduated in 2009. I wanted to take a moment this evening to describe my experience as a student of the Brookfield public school system and to voice my concerns around the lack of education and discussions surrounding racism that are currently status quo in our schools. Like many others, I could describe my experience of growing up in Brookfield and going through the public school system as a suburban bubble. Race was a topic that was rarely delved into beyond surface level lessons on the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. Much of the complexities of the histories of BIPOC were left out of our history books, leaving us with an education that centered around white people. Partly due to this, I had spent a large part of my life assuming that racism was an over there problem, not only to realize that that viewpoint itself was extremely problematic as an adult. It's taken me up to this point in my life to realize that I am actually part of the problem. As I reflected on my life to come to a reckoning with how we have continually come to this place as a society, I've realized that ignorance is the worst excuse as to why systemic racism lives on in this country. The simple antidote to this ignorance is education. Children need to have the exposure to the complexities of race and have open, honest, and respectful conversations about them. We too often think that we need to shield children from these complexities. However, it is absolutely necessary for this education to occur. I don't want my experience being sheltered in my education to be the norm for our younger generations, and I'm asking the Board of Education to consider reviewing and amending curriculums to include anti-racism work and more accurate and inclusive portrayals of BIPOC in American history and culture. In addition, I'm also asking the Board of Education to consider implementing a diversity task force to consistently and continually review the dynamics of our public school system to ensure our schools are a safe place for BIPOC students. Thank you for your consideration and your time this evening.
Thank you. Hayley, the floor is all yours.
Hi, I'm Hayley Goodrich, BHS class of 2013. My family address in Brookfield is 1 Derby Court, and my full-time residence is 1236 Pacific Street, Brooklyn, New York. So you've heard from a number of us already, so I'll make this brief, but we actually represent a group of students, alumni, parents, and residents, over 215 strong, who are committed to actively teaching and embodying anti-racism in the Brookfield education system. Many of our group are watching this live stream tonight, and many of us will continue to watch how the board moves to address structural racism, oppression, and privilege in our school system. First, I want to take a moment to actually thank all of the speakers who prepared remarks and came out to the public comment tonight. I appreciate that it's not easy to share such personal stories, and I, for one, am grateful for the strength of mind and heart that you've each demonstrated in showing up for our community tonight, so thank you. I also want to recognize a particular conundrum that's been top of mind for me as we've listened to these stories. So how can it be that while students of color endured covert and sometimes overt displays of racism at Brookfield schools, their white peers, myself included, had to leave our hometown for our education on race to begin? Something in there doesn't quite add up for me. I will also be the first to acknowledge that progress has been made since I last walked the halls of the Brookfield Public Schools. And I'm also here to say it has not been enough. We are here tonight to show you that the Brookfield community cares about seeing the work of anti-racism brought into the classroom. We are prepared to offer our time, energy, and professional expertise as teachers, school counselors, social workers, artists, and more as a resource to the Brookfield school system. We are ready to hold ourselves, each other, our school faculty and staff, and our democratically elected officials accountable for the timely and deliberate implementation of anti-racist initiatives within the Brookfield education system. And to that end, we have a few questions we would like to submit to the board for consideration, and I will be following up with these over email as well. We're wondering, what changes are you currently considering towards the curriculum? On what timescale can students expect to see these changes enacted in the classroom? And while we understand that curricular changes are a long-term ask, we ask, are there interim measures that can be implemented for the 2020-2021 school year? Are you considering anti-racism training for teachers? And finally, I'd like to highlight again the Black Lives Matter rally that is being organized by Kiana Shabazz Williams, who we heard from tonight, and her sister Zaya, happening this Saturday, June 20th at 4 p.m. at the Town Hall. We certainly hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley, and thank you everyone for taking the time to come back to speak to us. You're all very articulate, and it's nice that you still have a connection to Brookfield. I'm not going to address any of the questions directly at this point, but if you would, I would encourage you all to stay for the rest of the meeting, where we do have an agenda item that addresses this. And of course, if you still would like to submit your questions in writing, I do encourage that as well. Okay, anyone else for public comment? I think I got everyone. Okay, so we can move on to written correspondence.
Okay. Ron Jaffe shared information on available resources during school closure and a link to a Sesame Street virtual town hall addressing racial justice. And Adonai Sebastian, Haley Goodrich, Tess Haggerty, Bridget Haggerty, and Jack Haggerty wrote regarding a statement from the school district on current events and racial injustices. That's it.
Okay, thank you. On to approval of board minutes.
I move that the board approve the minutes listed below, the regular meeting on June 3rd, 2020, and the special meeting on June 11th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussions, questions, edits on any of these? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. The superintendent's update.
Thank you, Rosa. And thank you for the folks from for public comment, to Adonai and the Haggerty siblings who met with me last week, and it was an absolute pleasure. Eye-opening, exciting to see successful graduates and alumni, and I thank them for their time. It was time well spent on this exact topic that they spoke to this evening at public comment. So I have a few things I wanted to talk with. Kindergarten enrollment update, fresh off the press from Mrs. Diamond. Right now, we are at 158 students registered that have confirmed. Thank you. And there are 13 more eligible that we're aware of that have not begun the registration process, but the school is working to connect with them. And that puts us at around 171 that we're expecting, which is still our projected enrollment at this point. Of course, a lot will happen over the summer, and progress or lack thereof with COVID and the public health information obviously will affect that, as parents are watching things very closely. Just for reference point, current year we have 181 students to start the year, and we actually have 183 enrolled right now. And that's something we always talk about, is watching that uptick in enrollment. So we're paying close attention to that. And I just like to thank Mrs. Diamond for getting that update to us. Extended school year enrollment update. The board is well aware that for our students with special needs, there are a number of students who qualify for services over the summer. And I'm happy to say that of about 170 that qualify, 165 that qualify, about 160 are enrolled. We're running a virtual program at this point this year. The parents, the super majority of parents, were very excited to hear that that was the way it was going to be done. It is a synchronous program, and there's a lot of live instruction. So we're really excited about that. And of course, that starts July 6th after the holiday break. And we're really excited about seeing how that works out. The special education administrators working with Dr. Ruby have ordered manipulatives and other supplies, and basically a learning goodie bag for the students that they'll be able to pick up and bring to their houses and be able to work virtually with their teachers. So we're really excited about the program this summer. BHS graduation update, just so everybody knows, for the public, but the board as well. We are going to have a parade to start off the festivities, which will be staged and begin at Wisconsin right around 10:15 at 11 a.m. sharp. The parade will disperse from, we'll leave Wisconsin up Route 25. Anybody in the public who wants to stand on their lawn and wave and do those kind of things, please do. We will then, all cars will enter the student lot. From there, remain socially distant and or in their cars, and staff, police, security. It's going to be great. Our graduation parents are there. It is going to be wonderful with our volunteers, and the kids will walk in as a senior graduate with their parents, 15 feet apart, and process music, decorations from the student lot to the gym, through the school to the auditorium, where we will have them receive their diploma, name announced, everything live streamed and videotaped and edited for later. Nice picture with the backdrop, and it's just going to be a heck of a celebration. I think, like I was saying before the meeting, I think a lot of the celebration may be something that we incorporate going forward in the coming years, so people are really excited about some of the things we're doing. At this time, I'd like to just, our parents on the board of 8th graders, if you would like to share a little bit about today's Wisconsin Moving Up event. There's a little parade going in there at the school and picture opportunities. So I'd like to share a little bit.
It was a great celebration. It was so nicely done. It was very evident how much thought and care and planning went into making it such a special experience for our 8th graders. I really can't think of anything I would have done differently or anything that was missing. It was just perfect. And of course, we would have loved to be together inside, or at least with a bigger crowd of people. But you could really feel just all the care that the staff and the teachers and all the volunteers have for this class of 8th graders. So I am very grateful for everything that went into it. It was really a magnificent experience.
I agree. I echo everything that Deb said. It went really smoothly. I just appreciate all the effort from Mr. Renda and the rest of the 8th grade staff and all the parent volunteers. It was really nicely done.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Amy and Deb. Really appreciate that. I wanted to just share from the letter of communication that I sent out yesterday regarding what's going on with kind of an update on school reopening. I know we've talked about it quite a bit. And what's Dr. Burrell, what's the status? I get a lot of that. What are we doing? Do you have any inside information? I'll share with you a little bit about locally what we're doing, and certainly can answer questions if anybody from the board has any. So some of this may be a little bit rudimentary, but I want to just remind the public that we've established a school reopening committee made up of a variety of our stakeholders, including parents, students, teachers, administrators, a representative from our different unions, and 2 representatives from this board, and 2 from the Board of Finance. We've been meeting over the last few weeks. In fact, we have a meeting first thing tomorrow morning, which will be our final meeting prior to awaiting for the July 6th update from the state. While the teams made suggestions regarding the various instructional models for reopening, it's all based on our public health information and the directives we have now. Public health information, as we all know, continues to change on a daily basis. The administrators will take the input and suggestions from our non-educator stakeholders and be working on that all summer long. And we're going to try to turn around a plan as quickly as possible, because as we all know, waiting till July 6th, all of a sudden you blink and you're in the last week of July, and people need to know what's going on. And so we're going to be working very hard on this. The other piece I really want to emphasize, I think sometimes people in the public think that, I know sometimes I get credit for having a heck of a lot more authority than I do. We as a school system absolutely do not operate in isolation. We have requirements regarding reopening that have to be in alignment with health and safety regulations. That comes from starting with the federal government, from the Center for Disease Control to our State Department of Public Health, and certainly working directly with the Brookfield Health Department, who would have to green light our plan and allow us to open. It could not be just me saying an assurance. We'd have to work with Dr. Sullivan. The other piece about that is that, oh, and I already mentioned about July 6th, that the State Department of Education will provide updated guidelines and or requirements or restrictions for how we might be able to open. And that final meeting is tomorrow with the stakeholder group for the reopening team. So a lot of good work going into it already. If anybody's interested, we have a link on the website. We've actually just recorded the meetings rather than take minutes, so they're up there if anybody wants to look. We'll see how it goes tomorrow and get the information we have in that regard. The final piece I wanted to share is I was able to participate in a Governor Lamont conference call this afternoon. As we know, today we enter phase 2. I think everybody knows that. And the plan is for mid-July to enter phase 3. But right now, it was some great public health news. Hospitalizations in Connecticut continue to trend down. Identified cases continue to trend down, and fatalities continue to trend down. And at this point, from what I was told on the meeting, 95% of businesses can open. The majority of those open, I guess, at 50% capacity. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. With the requirements still being a mask out in those establishments, and of course the social distancing we've all learned about over time. So that's my report. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Thank you for your time. You're on mute, Rosa.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Dr. Burrell? Okay, so we can move on to subcommittee reports, and up first is facilities.
Okay, so we met on the 3rd, June 3rd, and we reviewed the NEASC report and got clarity and more information on the items in the report from Mr. Belanda and Mr. Caldwell. And at our July meeting, we'll continue to discuss these items as they relate to our 10-year capital plan. Mr. Caldwell gave us some project updates. So the middle school paving started on Monday, June 8th with the concrete sidewalks, and after graduation, they'll tear it up and do the paving. At WMS, the fire pump generator has been commissioned, and they're looking to close the project and schedule an inspection. There's been roof maintenance at Wisconir and the high school. There have been many chronic leaks and many tiles have been replaced. About $10,000 worth of maintenance that has been very much needed has taken place. 2 sections of the roof at the high school were worked on as well. Mr. Caldwell updated us on the 2 open head custodian positions. And we reviewed the new COVID cleaning and sanitizing protocols, specifically as it relates to summer school. And we'll definitely need additional staff and equipment to adhere to this criteria. And that's it.
Okay, any questions for Joy? All right, thank you, Joy. Okay, up next is finance.
We had a rather short meeting on the Finance Committee this month. Really, the sole topic was the update on our financial status for the current year, and then the discussion of how that implicates next year. This year's forecast, and you guys have a copy of the current outlook in the consent agenda, is we had been projecting about a $560,000 underrun this year, and that lightened a little bit to about $485,000 underrun. So that's a notable. I can't say it's worsening, but it's a less of an underrun from where we were, and it was driven partly by reimbursement from the state. The state is actually reimbursing special education coverage at a lower percentage than we've seen historically, or we outlooked. And that was about a third of it, and about a little over half of it was some exposures in our health benefits costs, mostly driven by people who didn't retire. And what's interesting about that is, people, retirees get health coverage, but they pay for it. And if they don't retire, then the district pays 80% of it and the employee pays 20%. So it was just a financial exposure to us. Reason it's a sensitivity point, of course, is the Board of Finance is counting on us to underrun this year because that's how they're paying for some of the COVID-related things going on for both the district and for the town. And so we discussed at our meeting and then prepared answers for the Board of Finance, which has happening the following day, and that went pretty well, I thought. So Board of Finance asked their questions, they got answers, and Mr. Post even reported at that time that there's breaking news that actually takes it back the other way. We'll continue to have further underruns. So we're on the last month of the year. We're on a landing pattern toward well underrunning our budget. Calling the final number has been challenging, and we'll just continue to work it. That said, we're working with the town purchasing agent and with other members of the town to procure the COVID-related items that we need to open the district up for next year. And if you remember, we counted on some pull-aheads of certain items so that we would use that as part of our budget solution, and those are also underway. So all the pull-aheads and all the COVID-related purchases are being actively worked. In terms of the budget for next year, the Board of Finance did approve our budget. Actually, there was a little bit of a swizzle between a grant fund and some other items that actually allowed us to put a little bit of money into contingency, and we recommended to Ken that he leave that money, about $40,000, give or take, in contingency, right? Because, we got so many unknowns going into next year. So that was the entirety of our discussion. I expect that the next couple of months we will be really focusing on how the year closes and then the impact of whatever method we choose for opening the schools, what that may have on us. And it could go in a lot of different directions. So I just will highlight to all of us that we're going to have to be very light on our feet in the months of August and September and October as we see what the opening plan looks like and figure out what that means to us budget-wise. Because you can picture situations that means we'll spend more, and other situations which means we may spend less, and we'll have to deal with that in a very active way as a board. So I expect we'll have a discussion every board meeting. So that's the report. And can I take any questions? Okay, back to you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks, Bob. All right, we have the consent agenda.
I move that the board approve the items on the consent agenda as recommended. We have resignations.
A second.
Thanks, Joy. Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. Thank you. On to new business. We have the approval of field trips for the 2021.
Rosa, I'm going to drop out of the meeting. I can't hear. I'm going to have to sign back in.
Okay.
So Eric, you got to let him back in, okay?
Can I go ahead?
Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead and make the motion.
Yeah. I will move that the board approve the attached list of field trips for the 2020-21 school year as recommended by Brookfield High School Principal Mark Valanda.
Second.
Okay. Thanks, Joy. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at these trips? I think they're the standard ones. Any questions on those? And we went ahead and just made the motion. Do you have any comments on the field trips?
Thank you. I do not. I dropped out there, so I had to re-sign in. So no, standard field trips. Talked with Mark today. Standard field trips, nothing fancy. Annual things we work on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Okay, so all in favor?
Let's hope they get to take field trips next year.
I know, right?
I was thinking.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you. On to approval of field trips for the sports for the 2021 school year.
Okay, I move that the board approve the attached list of sports field trips for the 2020-21 school year as requested by Athletic Director Steve Baldwin.
Second.
Second.
Oh, Joy got it. All right, any questions or comments on these? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes again. Thank you. All right, on to the approval of design development phase.
Okay, I move that the board approve the design development phase of the new school project as presented by Tecton Architects as the basis for the construction documents phase.
Second.
Thanks, Bob.
I got one.
So I think everybody was either there last night at the NBC meeting or has watched back the video. So does anybody have any questions or anything about that presentation that we can discuss here? Because essentially what we're voting on now is the end of design development. There's not going to be any major changes after this. So, I think Tecton did a really, really nice job presenting the building, and it was the first time that I had seen all of the renderings kind of together in one space, and I got really excited seeing all those photos, or not photos, but the drawings, and I think it's going to be a beautiful building. So I'm pretty excited about it, but and I think they've done a good job bringing the project to this point and answering questions. So I'm interested to know what you guys thought.
So does our vote here tonight preclude the comeback item that they have on the facade and the design points on that, or is that kind of within the edges of the design that they can continue to work on?
I think they can. Yeah, I think they can continue to work on little stuff like that. Yeah, I think just the overall the footprint of the building is going to be pretty much set in stone now, and where it sits on the site and things like that. So, yeah.
So one of the questions I have is for Dr. Burrell, right? Because as our chief administrator of our district, I think before we vote, we want to make sure that we hear your opinion on the design and that it meets all the educational priorities that we've established and set out in great depth. They were very complimentary, but before we vote, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, no, our program requirements that were put forth in that, you may recall approving that early last spring, the educational specifications. They were able to meet all of those with the design of the building. So that's the main piece. And then obviously all the functional pieces that we've been going over, from parking lots to site plan to the way the neighborhoods are designed, the bridges. They didn't get into that last night in the presentation, but the bridges, the outdoor bridges between the grade levels. I mean, it's really interesting and cool aspects. What I'm really excited about is the architects and through the NBC, we've stayed with the ADA compliant playscapes, which was a really big feature that we talked about and actually met with some different parents about that. And all the input from the user groups, whether that was our custodial team, our nurses, our teachers, our pupil personnel services group, special education teachers, just so many people have been a part of it, and the vision now is coming into a reality. And it was just very special to see it last night. So we're really excited, Bob, and we're ready to forge forward. We're ready to go.
So I know your teams, the elementary principals and a lot of the teachers and a lot of the building staffs provided a lot of input. Have they seen the final product as proposed, and have they seen the presentation from last night? Have you gotten any feedback?
No, they have not seen that. Well, they could go on the website and look, but I have not sent it to them. We just received the actual PowerPoint earlier this afternoon from Mr. Checo. He sent it to all of us actually. So now that we have that, Eric may have already posted it on the new school project website, but the meeting from last night was posted first thing this morning. And we can easily get those links out to the team. But the day didn't offer me the time to get that to the folks yet.
Busy. I will admit it's a busy time right now. So
it's been quite a challenging year, to say the least. What we're really,
that is, you believe this meets the requirements as we've outlined as a district.
Yes. I'll leave it nice, short and sweet. Yes.
I was pretty impressed too, Rosa. They've done. I'm so glad we hired Tecton.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so this is I think it's going to be unanimous, I think, but this is a big vote. I mean, this is going to be, you know, the biggest project this town's ever done. So, you know, we're finally making some real progress, and construction starting is really exciting. So, does anybody have any other discussion, comments, questions on this before we bring it to a vote?
You know, Rosa, maybe I should just step in one more piece here. That's just very important for everybody to know. And again, for the public as a reminder, this is a very lengthy process. When I first got here 5 years ago, people had told me, John, we've been working on getting a new school for 25 years. So it's been talked about for a long time. We started to take action years ago, and we've been working diligently for 4 years now to get to this point. But again, magically, we don't just magically put a shovel in the ground and get a building. It is going to take another 2 to 2.5 years to get us in position where it's absolutely completely done. And now we're starting to really work on those plans. And while the students will remain at Center School, the students will remain at Huckleberry, and the students will remain in the 5th grade at Wiskaneer before they transition to the new school, let's just say September 1st of 2022, which is a little more than 2 years away. There's going to be, it's important to let everybody know there will be inconvenience. There's going to be construction. There will be access road on the south side for construction equipment to be moved in and out and keep the kids safe. But there will be interference, especially during the 21-22 school year, because there's so much site and parking lot work that needs to be done in swing space just for parking spaces, and then the demolition of the building over the summer of 2022, and then early in the fall, summer and early in the fall of 2022, when the kids are in the new building, still working on the new roadways and parking lots and things. So there's going to be a lot of work ahead, and we're going to ask people, like anything that's hard, anything that's worthwhile, it's not easy and it's hard to achieve. So we have to be patient and we have to be supportive of one another, just like we've been this spring, but certainly for happier and different circumstances. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows this is still a long way away.
That's a really good point.
Construction bid probably in December, and then the first small bit of groundbreaking will be in March or April of 2021. Thank you.
Great. Excellent points. Thank you. Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. The vote passes. Very
So
exciting.
Rosa, before we move on, I'd just like to make a comment too. We have a lot of alumni and members of the public on the thing. I just will tell you, if you're interested in seeing an interesting presentation on this, go on the town website, find the YouTube video section, and look at the Municipal Building Committee meeting from last night. You can scroll through that. They had some introductory business, but when the Tecton architects get up, they actually walk through a schematic of the building and actually some artist renditions of different angles on the building, what it would look like. And there was a good discussion about some design points. But it's a school I think Brookfield will be very proud of.
Okay. So we can move on. Food service contract extension.
I will make a motion that the board approve the extension of the Whitson's food service contract for the 2020-21 school year as recommended by Director of Business and Operations Ken Post.
Second.
Thanks, Joy. Okay. So Ken, do you want to explain this one?
Sure. The district has a 5-year agreement with Whitson's, which was signed in 2016. The state requires us to execute a contract renewal amendment every year, which basically gives us the opportunity at any given time during the 5-year contract, if we're not satisfied, to go out to bid again. So this is a standard form from the state approved that amends the contract to go 1 more year. And this will be the final year of this 5-year agreement. So we'll be going out to bid again in the spring.
Okay. I just have a question. What is the percentage increase over last year? It looks like it's broken down into two fees, management and administrative.
It's
Is that
3.2%, and that's a rate provided by the state.
Okay. So that's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Comments? Okay, we'll bring it to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Okay, an open letter to the community that we serve, a discussion and possible motion. So this is just an action. We don't have a motion here, but so what we have done and is drafted a letter. John and I kind of worked on the original structure of it, and then it has been edited and reviewed by board members and other staff members, key people in the district that have really, this has now become sort of like a much bigger sort of letter that's gotten a lot of contributions from everyone. So this is a letter, obviously, that states our values regarding race and diversity. And what I'd like to do first, so that the community understands what exactly we are voting on, I'd like to go ahead and read that letter aloud, and then we can have some discussion from the board, because we'd like to have this be sort of, because it's going to be coming from the board and from the district, some discussion so that hopefully board members feel comfortable endorsing this. So I'm going to go ahead and read this first. So, an open letter to our community. Our nation is grappling with systemic issues it has struggled to address for generations. Individuals, including citizens in Brookfield, are feeling the need to act. We are all disturbed by the events that have revealed how racism, a lack of empathy and compassion, and injustice have contributed to inequality among Americans. Action is required, and like so many problems we face, education can bring about long-lasting change. We are committed to ensuring the educational experience in Brookfield is part of the solution. Laws, policies, and practices addressing discriminatory behavior are commonplace. Our district has thoughtfully designed policies to protect the rights and dignity of students, staff, and members of the community. However, we must enhance our policies by facing the underlying attitudes and beliefs that contribute to racism. In both its intentional and unintentional forms, racism has no place in Brookfield schools. As a district, we remain committed to being a safe, supportive, and inclusive community. We respect and value the diversity of our members and embrace opportunities to learn from and grow with each other. Recognizing and raising awareness about biases regarding race, gender, orientation, religion, and other differences, and addressing these issues through culturally responsive and developmentally appropriate curriculum is important and foundational in a 21st century education. We must educate our students to recognize racial bias within themselves and others and how to properly address it when it occurs. It is the responsibility of a comprehensive education to ensure that the next generation understands the history of racism in the United States and its continued impact on the present. Our State Commissioner of Education, Miguel Cardona, has recently stated, quote, "As adults and educators, we must be proactive about making this a teachable moment by addressing issues of racism and inequity head on," end quote. As a district, we believe that actions make a greater impact than words. The Board of Education and Superintendent are scheduling a summer retreat to set specific and actionable objectives to address diversity, equity, and race in our district's educational priorities. Real change takes dedication and focus, and we will use the summer workshop to build substantive actions, some of which will have immediate impact and others that will grow and thrive over time. Civil and peaceful movements inspire unity, compassion, and action. We are committed to ensuring all students, staff members, and families feel welcomed, safe, and supported. Only by teaching our students to humbly recognize problems, to have the courage to reflect and show empathy, and to solve complex issues can we help them create their tomorrow. So all of you have a copy of that final draft of the letter. So what I would like to do is hear from my fellow board members in sort of this open and public forum, so that we can hopefully come together as a board, put something out as one. So anybody would like to go first? Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so I'll go first. I feel like this is an important thing for us to do as a school district and particularly as a board, because it's a way for us to say that, much like a lot of the speakers said, maybe we weren't aware ourselves, maybe we ignored things before, but no longer. And the mistakes of the past are giving us an opportunity to do better. We can all do better in the future. So I'm proud to be part of a district that is able to strongly state our values, because that's what will guide our work. If we can get together to say, this is what's important, this is what we want, how we want to challenge ourselves, every step that we make along the way can go back to those values that we've espoused. So I fully support and I'm proud to be part of that type of a letter to our community.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say I fully support the letter as well. I think it's very well written and includes everything that we as a school district want to represent and reflect in our educational system. I just wanted to build on some of the comments from the speakers that spoke tonight. And I think, you know, one of the things that really resonated with me was, I think it was Liz Murphy who said she really didn't feel like there was anybody she could go to. She didn't feel that she could talk to anyone about what she was hearing and being exposed to. And I feel like we really need to pay attention to that. And, you know, yes, there are laws and policies and practices in place, but I don't think those laws and policies and practices on paper are enough. So we have to do whatever we can to ensure that our staff and anybody else in the school, parents, coaches, are not only listening, but also maybe inquiring from time to time. You know, maybe it's not something that kids are comfortable broaching as a subject unless someone asks them. So I'm not sure how to do that, but I think that's important.
Go ahead, Bob.
So in one of the edits of the letter, as it was going around, somebody inserted the word humbly in the last paragraph. And it says, only by teaching our students to humbly recognize problems, have the courage to reflect and show empathy, and solve complex issues, can we help them create their tomorrow. One thing I'm going to say is, it's not just students, it's us, right? And the administration. What I heard tonight was, you can't walk into this discussion with any assumptions. We have to be humble in our accepting the fact that we have racism in Brookfield. And we're not preparing our students to go out in the bigger, wider world, because Brookfield is like any small town, is a microcosm. And we have students that go out in the world, and they are our tomorrow. So I think when we go to our workshop, which I hope we're choosing dates pretty quickly because this is going to get stale, but I think we ought to start with a discussion of, we do have problems, and we got to accept that. We don't have a strong curriculum on racism, and we can deal with that. We have to have processes and procedures that allow people to speak up and be heard when there's an issue. And we have to be able to eradicate problems when they rise. Somebody said it today, some of the racism's rooted in the families. So part of what we also have to do is help students understand that they can be strong in standing up to racism, which I think is very important. So I think this is really important, but I do think I will urge us all to come into that discussion very humbly and then come out of that discussion with hard actions that we can be taking like on day one. Because for me, the frustration with the whole discussion is there's a lot of noise, there's not a lot of action yet. And I want to, the noise is important to drive action. So I got that. But right, it's up to us to make it action, right? That's what small town boards are about. And I feel really strongly about that.
Great.
I wanted to
Anyone
say what one of the speakers said that really resonated with me, and I agree, is that like through our school system and our education, I had the same experience. You learn about slavery and then the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, and then it kind of ends there. And racism is still obviously very prevalent in this country. It has continued to be, and that's something that I think we need to really address head on in our schools and not pretend, you know, just because we had a Black president doesn't mean this country isn't still extremely racist. We have a big problem. And I look forward to taking the lead on that.
Thank you, Amy.
You know, I don't think we do enough on civics in general. I think we like have one elective on civics, and civics is current events. It's what's facing us as we're doing it. I think that this all fits under that general topic. And I do think we owe it to our students to have them not just learn history, but also learn how do you deal with the world and the world as it is, not the world as you wish it was. So, sorry, I won't keep going.
Mike, did you want to say something? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
I don't want to. I'm not going to belabor infos because everything Debbie said, everything Bob said, everything Amy said is. I mean, I'm just going to repeat it all because it's great. I just want to rehash the point of, you know, again, I really agree with Debbie here. Same thing with Liz Murphy. I'm sure there's no relation, but as you probably know a few Murphys, that you should feel safe in your school. Period. End of sentence. I mean that is very. It is tough to hear that you can't go to a teacher or administrator with an issue. So you know, as a parent as well, that does. You know, definitely strikes a chord. So I think first and foremost, we need to establish that trust with students, and it's okay to come to administrator or teacher. I mean, for those problems. That's
okay. Joy.
Yeah, I think the letter is a good first step in promoting positive change. And we can really, capitalize on what we're facing right now. And, I look forward to working with each of you and, moving ahead and making positive changes moving forward.
And Rosa, is there an opportunity for me to speak at this moment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to make sure the board members have their turn. I'd like to humbly ask Dr. Ruby, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction and Personnel, to share to humbly share some of the things we're doing in curriculum, because there's been a lot of generalizations and statements made tonight, and it's important that we know where we are. And to the point Joy just made, the letter is a great first step for positive action. I think we've all alluded to that and the work we need to start this summer and then move forward. But there are some things that I think are important for the board to know that are ongoing as we get ready to build. And some of the I know in the first edits, I think Mr. Belvin had a statement in there about actions we might immediately see some change on. And so I think this is an exciting opportunity for Dr. Ruby to share a few items for you. Dr. Ruby?
So thank you for the opportunity to speak. So what's interesting, and I don't know, how many people know anything about me, but prior to coming to Brookfield, I spent the majority of my educational career in priority school districts, so very diverse communities. This is the first non-priority school district that I've worked in since I began my career. And one of the things that struck me when I came to Brookfield is, number one, what a lovely and caring community it was. And I was really uplifted by the fact that we had the opportunity to tackle curricular changes, because they were definitely needed, particularly with the changes in the standards in the state of Connecticut. We no longer have a set of standards whereby you can introduce in the spring part of the year preparatory components to prepare students to do well on CMT tests or CAPT, the assessments that the state has chosen. And I'm not standing here or sitting here as a sponsor of standardized tests. They're just a fact of life. And, you know, we're a public school district, so we have to abide by those laws. But we didn't have curriculum that would support students in the type of endeavors that they would be challenged by, both on state assessments and when they got into college and career. So we've had amazing support from the board for the finances that were needed for curricular changes. And necessarily we had to start with math and ELA, since those are two subjects that really impact all of the other subjects. Social studies is an area that I've advocated for a number of years. And we're really challenged, and we really must meet that challenge of developing what I would call civic competence and an appreciation of diversity, not just in high school courses, but from the very get-go. And we have been working on developing a standards-aligned social studies curriculum that really gets at that very heart, that starts at the kindergarten level. So in our current curriculum, which is quite old, that we are addressing the same things over and over and over again. And some of the speakers here who are highly articulate have addressed some of those same thematic kind of things that we, you know, Martin Luther King Day, this day, that day, and we're just basically going through activities. So our goal is to really develop a social studies curriculum that engages kids in understanding diversity within their own families, diversity within the community, and diversity within the world, through a study that begins in kindergarten and then leads up to the higher level courses that they take in high school. And that is going to require them to have civic engagement. So one of the other things that we're doing in terms of bringing diversity to the forefront, and not just racism, all kinds of diversity, because while racism is critically important, especially considering what's going on in the world today, there are other issues that all of our children must be exposed to. And I think that it was very well said by almost everybody that spoke tonight, that it's not just the children in the schools, but it's the families and the community. Because if we teach things in schools about diversity, about orientation, about gender, about religious differences, and students are only getting that in school, and then they go back into their homes and into the community, we're not really providing a wraparound services for the way kids are thinking. And we're setting up a dichotomy of messages that they're getting from three different areas: from school, from family, from community. So cultural responsive curriculum is something that's critically important to doing this, and not as just social studies, but as integrated curriculum with literacy, with our social emotional learning curriculum, and with the humanities. So I wrote a competitive grant this year, long before we had the virus epidemic, and before we had the situation that we're facing, that we're talking about tonight. And it was a competitive grant, a federal grant, and it was really built around culturally responsive curriculum and supporting, as you all pointed out, it has to start with the adults. So our teachers, our staff, our mental health providers have to understand what culturally responsive curriculum means, and that involves communication. So long before we got to tonight, we were working on that. Long before we got to tonight, we definitely have an understanding of the need for a diversity and civic engagement focused curriculum in social studies that's also aligned with our ELA and our writing. And so we have to bring speaking, writing, and listening skills into the forefront when we're talking about all this. There's so much that I could talk to you about tonight about what we have been working on and what we've been advocating for in terms of financial support with our classroom libraries and aligning the literature that's in those libraries to support our ELA curriculum as well as our social studies curriculum. So I think that we can prepare documents to show you exactly what we're doing in the summer retreat that the superintendent is coming up with. The other thing that I would share with you is that 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I was placed on an national SEL subcommittee of AASA, which is the American Superintendents Association. And we had our first meeting in Nashville. And this was at the topic, social emotional learning and culturally responsive curriculum. And I'm on that committee. We were supposed to be going this June to a site visit in Andover. Andover is a school district that's working with a school district in New York and a school district in Kentucky on social emotional learning curriculum and social studies curriculum that just has this focus that we're talking about tonight. We were unable to go to the site visit. So for the past 3 weeks and next week, we're having a virtual site visit. So an hour and a half of working with the teachers from the Andover and the administrators from the Andover Public School. And I'm working with them and in the study group from these 3 states that are looking at how do you really revamp the curriculum so that it's not an activity-based or an event-based or, oh, we covered that, but really engaging students in identifying who they are, respecting who they are, understanding who their community is, and then going broader to understand what's going on in the world and taking it in a personal way for civic engagement. So not just what is going on, but what can I do about it? And I think that's what we need to do. So I look forward to being able to speak to you in a more coherent way with evidence of what we're doing so that you can chime in. And I really appreciated, I think I wrote down, Steph, you talked about, the support of people in your group who have spoken tonight, wanting to help us with that. And I particularly picked up on something I think you said artists. So the last thing I'll tell you about is a project that kind of got sidetracked. We're still working on it because of the virus. I wrote a grant last year that we were hoping to implement this year. And it was for using the grant funds to integrate the arts into our social studies curriculum. And the pilot that got approved for this grant was in the 7th grade social studies curriculum. And it was on protest and the revolution. And so the curriculum that was designed for the pilot in working with Arts for Learning Connecticut was looking at, this would probably be very engaging for middle school students, looking at graffiti and hip hop music lyrics as forms of protest. And we had artists in residence that were going to come into Wisconsin and work with our social studies teachers to really take this whole concept of protest, looking at the Harlem Renaissance and what went on at the Apollo Theater, looking at the whole hip hop evolution, looking at graffiti art, through that lens of people needing to express how they felt about the issues that they were protesting about. And so we were super excited about that because it aligns with our state standards. It's engaging the arts. It's having artists in residence working with our teachers right in our school system. And that's on hold right now, but I just got notice and Mr. Post got notice the other day that we just received another $10,000. So we didn't get to spend our money this year, so we have twice as much money for next year. So we're working on this. It's really very important to me. And I can't wait to work with you guys in the summer. Hopefully you'll be around either through Zoom or if you're visiting.
Maureen, thank you so much for going through that. It's really important to share because I think we're in a good position for launch on this. And I've said enough though. I'll turn it over to Rosa for this part of the.
So I agree. I think we're in a good place to do something, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that everything you talked about, Dr. Ruby, sounded great, but I hear a lot of inclusivity, diversity, all of that isn't new. I think we are in a completely new era, and there is a very big difference between inclusivity and deliberate anti-racist training. And I think I would just like to see some much more very deliberate anti-racist training or parts of the curriculum, not just sort of, learning about each other and being culturally aware and all of that stuff, which is all great. But I think we need to do something radically different. And I think that's the world we're living in. And I too went to Brookfield and did not get my sort of education in the real world until I left. And I'm not a person of color, but I am raising one. And I do not want her going through the same school system coming out of that without that sort of basis of what the real world really is like. And it's not always pretty, and it's not always going to be, even for people who have had diversity and inclusivity training, education, it's not always going to be a pretty environment for her either. So, I would like, to see something a little more radical. And if that could just be, kept in mind when you're, designing some of these tools, I think that would be a better way to go.
No, I hear what you're saying. I'm just telling you what we've done in the past. That's what we've been working on. What you're talking about tonight in terms of racism, that's what the summer seminar is going to be about. And that's work that needs to be done. But my point was that we haven't been in a void of not dealing with diversity, because if you look at the curriculum documents that have been in existence up until now, that's really not in there, except for what the former students have shared.
Right.
So it's a step.
Yeah. And to that point, so we Dr. Burrell and I are going to work on, scheduling that summer retreat. We'll probably pull in some people from CABE who can help facilitate some of that and be a good resource to us. Does anybody have any other sort of questions, either for Dr. Ruby on the curriculum or the letter that's, we can make a motion on that? Any other comments? All right. So I'm going to move that the board approve its value statement regarding race and diversity as an open letter to the community as read tonight.
I'll second.
Thank you, Amy. All right, any other last questions, comments? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to old business, we have the new school project, but I think we pretty much covered all of that. Any other questions or comments on that? We could probably move past that. So we are on our 3 main points. The new school project probably should be one of them.
All of our speakers tonight and addressing racism in our country and our community, I think.
Yep.
And
you want to mention the approval of Whitson's, the renewal of Whitson's contract?
Maybe the moving up? I don't know.
Graduation.
Graduation ceremonies, moving up, you could summarize those.
Both in one category, yeah.
And also John mentioned the opening of school, you know.
Oh, the reopening committee.
That's
Yeah,
kind of,
let's do let's do the reopening committee.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good call.
We did vote on the school too. I don't know if that's a.
Yeah, yeah, that's
The design development, yeah, we have to say that. That's a big.
Yeah, that'll be
that's a big
first.
one.
Certainly more interesting than the Whitson's contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Ken.
All right. So you got those, Deb?
Yep.
Okay. So upcoming events.
Okay, the last day of school is this Friday, June 19th at Center Elementary School. Tomorrow, Thursday, June 18th is the summer reading kickoff campout. There's a Sweet Dreams story time with Mrs. Diamond and special guests and Zoom at 7 p.m. And Friday, June 19th is the reverse parade drive-through. 9 to 9:30 is preschool, 9:30 to 10:15 for kindergarten, and 10:15 to 11 for first grade. At Huckleberry on Thursday, tomorrow, June 18th, is the reverse parade from 10 to 12. The schedule for that was also shared with families, and that's alphabetical by last name. And at Wisconsin on Friday, there's a reverse parade clap out by grade level. 8th grade is 10 to 10:30, 7th, 10:40 to 11:10, 6th, 11:20 to 11:50, and 5th is 12 noon to 12:30. And then at Brookfield High School, we have the graduation on Saturday, June 20th. Cars lining up at Wisconsin at 10:30 and heading to Brookfield High School at 11 for the ceremony beginning at 11:30. And the ceremony will also be live streamed. And that's it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. So board members, we have an executive session. Amy, do you want to go ahead
Yep.
and make the motion?
I'll make a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation.
Second.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so this will conclude our publicly broadcasted portion of the meeting. And board members, I sent you a Google Meet link just before tonight's meeting. So just check your email and I will meet you there in a little bit.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you for coming to speak. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.